want to be like, I don't know, and this is where Brian is from, and this is what Brian is doing, and we'll get to all that in the show for sure. But it's just about what's new.
Conversation.
Yeah, because I mean, so you're doing the Gnome right now.
Yep.
You're doing Hope right now.
Yep.
Right. You're doing. I have a feeling there's certain things that are in the works. That, that maybe you're not ready to talk about.
I'm an open book. I'll talk about it.
Yeah, so you got stuff going on like by the hockey center, right?
We do, by the hockey center and over in West End.
Okay, all right. So it's like multiple places and kind of like a collage of different concepts, really, right? Yeah, and then you have Wood-Fired Grill.
Wood-Fired Cantina, formerly known as. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna welcome you in. Okay, so welcome to Minnesota Well Done. I'm Christos. This is Brian Ingram, restaurateur, big name in St. Paul, growing, doing great things. A big name in Minneapolis too. I mean, you're really making you're making a statement, and in a really good way that a lot of people really appreciate. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what happened at Wood-Fired Grill.
Sure.
Okay, so there was two big things that I remember that happened. First of all, you opened the place up and you were calling it elotes, right?
Yep.
So for people at home, elotes is it's word for corn.
Yes.
In Spanish, and but it's also like a specific way to make corn. Like that's kind of like the if you're looking at an etymology of what elotes is like you go to a taqueria and you can get elotes, and it's like actually a dessert that's kind of savory. It's got all these different toppings on it. So I thought it was a great name. I was like, oh yeah, it's it's wood fired. You're gonna be doing elotes there. I was really excited, and then
me too.
And then there was a huge kind of blowout against it. You had actual protesters.
We had them. They showed up at the restaurant, and there were some ritual drums going, and a lot of things that were happening that were completely kind of unexpected.
Yeah.
On my part, I guess unexpected and not like I had. One of the folks that was involved with it, I actually helped her get out of a lease from one of her restaurants during the pandemic. And then the next thing I knew, I was being blasted on social media by her.
Yeah, you were being demonized, man.
Yeah.
And I brought it up on the show, and it's one thing. Like I don't have a huge platform. This is actually kind of the point of the show is not to be this huge like giant platform. It's kind of to be a little bit more down to earth, a little bit more like chefs talking to chefs and kind of stuff like that. But it was one of those things where that whole argument was kind of moot in my opinion, because I've grown up in the restaurants, and that's kind of the whole thing is that we share culture, right? And that I mean, so, okay, can we break this down a little bit?
Yeah.
Because her problem was a little bit different than the actual name of the restaurant, right? Like her problem had to do with the people that were employed in management not being represented as the culture of the restaurant, if I remember correctly.
Which was completely unfounded because our GM, Pilar Garcia, was, and our chefs as well. Yes, we had a Caucasian chef there as well, but predominantly, even within salaried employees, were predominantly Hispanic and Mexican, and so that was a weird one for me. And just corn in general, like a lot of people don't even know my ethnicity. Or I have biracial kids. I have a father that is Comanche Indian from Arizona. All my family still lives in Arizona, and I was seeing these articles. Brian from New York. Brian worked in New York, but Brian's not from New York. I was born in Arizona, and my family goes back several generations there. So that was really weird for me to be getting called out on a lot of things that nobody even knew my kind of ancestry. So that was really weird for me.
They were calling you out on stuff, and then they were like, I'm going to assume this dude is white.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume he's being racist. It was wild, man. Because I was seeing some of the comments, and it was just like, I mean, it was a pretty visceral experience as somebody who was looking at it completely objectively, because, that is. I want to talk about like kind of the depth of it a little bit, because I've just kind of touched on it on the show, and I think that for one, you had even the people that you had employed, but you also had plans to employ Gonzalez, right?
Yeah.
Gonzalez was in the mix. So it was like for one, the whole plan was for it to be kind of this Latino native inspired place, and you were doing that, right? But even if it wasn't that, right? Like I know plenty of people who work at restaurants, run restaurants, who they didn't grow up in that country or with that culture, and I just think that it's an interesting like argument to make against like saying that it's some kind of appropriation, because it's like most of the food that I cook is not my own culture, right? Very few times in my life have I gotten to sell food that is Greek.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I just think that it's an interesting and kind of moot point to begin with. But the fact that you, when you said, like I'm native, it's like, people don't know the history of corn. I'm just like, I'm shocked by the whole situation. Yeah. So you did that, and it's been a crazy road, because that was happening all amidst, we had riots in our cities.
Yep.
We had a huge crime spike in our cities, which we'll get to it a little bit.
Sure.
We had, obviously the pandemic, and the multiple shutdowns, and kind of the cluster of government. What's the word when you come up short?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not necessarily like, I'm not gonna say evil, but like you're coming up short in terms of organizational capacity. It's like when me, someone who's technically like a line cook student, thinks that they like, I can honestly say that there's a better way to do this, and I can lay out the plan for a better way. Can get frustrating. So let's talk about it, because you're still making moves, man.
Yeah, for us, our whole thing with our restaurants is called purpose-driven restaurants, and again, most people would look at me and just think that I'm just your average white guy. I'm a fat, tattooed white guy.
Yeah.
And
stop taking my land, Brian, right?
And that's probably the experience I've grown up with in my life. Have I experienced racism with my kids? I lived in a small town in Arizona that was predominantly white, and I got in a fight at the checkout with a gentleman that was asking me about my adopted daughters, because my kids are Filipino and Hispanic. Yeah. And somebody said something super racist in the line at the grocery store, and I literally, we're going to go fist to cuff right there in line. But for me, have I personally had to deal with that? Never. And would I ever want to appropriate anybody and any of the struggles and any of that stuff? It's not who we are as a family. Our family is very diverse. And it's not something we would ever want to do. And within our restaurants, we've even said we're purposeful on how we hire, from LGBTQ to the folks that work in our restaurant, and having a safe work environment. So for me and my wife, Sarah, that was deeply personal when they were chanting in our restaurant, "Shame on the Ingrams, bring shame on them." My wife was, I think, 7 months pregnant. And we're going through a pandemic, and we're going through all of this stuff.
Wow.
I reached out to one of the ladies that was the head of all of it, and really pushing on me. And I said, "I'll give you the restaurant. We are a couple $100,000 into it." And I said, "I will give it to you right now. You can come take the keys." She said, "I don't want the restaurant." She just didn't want me to have the restaurant. So those were crazy, crazy times. And listen, I'm always learning, and I do a lot of stupid stuff. So if I had offended and I had done things that I shouldn't have done, I was open to listen. But that was one that I still struggle with, because I'm not sure what we did was right by changing the name. I think, of all things in the world, we say we come together over a meal, and that's, frankly, I think one of the greatest things about food is people coming together. And I wouldn't know what to cook if I wasn't allowed to cook outside of what most would deem my race. I wouldn't know what to cook because my kids are Filipino, so I love to cook that style of food. I love cooking. I'm from Arizona, so Southwestern cuisine is what I grew up with. I trained under Phil Romano with that. I trained with I had restaurants in New York with Alain Ducasse, French. I don't know what the hell I would cook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that, and that's kind of like my main like problem. My main problem. That's why I get like kind of angry as an onlooker, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're right when people say that, there's all these different cliches that people say about food, and I've come to find that all these cliches are absolutely 100% true. Mm-hmm. Like I've seen people who are in arguments come together over food. I've personally had the experience of connecting with almost every culture on the planet by cooking with them, right?
Yep.
And to see people kind of like enforcing, albeit in some kind of form where it's kind of dressed up as this way to increase minority participation. Mm-hmm. I'm all for the minority participation, but the actual segregation that that people are looking for, that's my problem with it.
Yeah.
So and I've met Sarah, and she's an absolutely wonderful human being. Yeah. You're an absolutely wonderful human being, and it just sucks to know that you were going through that. So that's the elote. Okay,
yeah, that's elote.
Let's put a pin in it.
Yes.
For now, because I don't want this to be a negative podcast, and I'm curious about a couple things about you.
Sure.
Just because I started hearing about you, kind of when you were starting the Gnome Project. But I had heard your name kind of like on the wind.
Sure.
And so here's a big thing about the show that I do. There's Minnesota all over the place.
Yeah.
It's become an opportunity for me to do my own little pet project on what Minnesotan cuisine is modernly, right? Not when the French came over, not historically, not in the 20s, right now, right? Where is the infrastructure supporting Minnesotan cuisine? Where is the award-winning food? Where is the food that everybody eats? I'm really, and I'm getting in the groove, baby.
Sure.
I'm starting to learn a lot about it. But you are somebody who kind of cut your teeth in other places and are now coming to Minnesota. Can you tell me some of the things that you've noticed as you've come into the Minnesota culture? Because you came into Stillwater first, right?
Well, I came in, New Bohemia is one of the concepts I had created. So New Bohemia 2012 is when I came in, and then a gentleman that I was partnered with, Bob Sabis, owned the Freight House in Stillwater. And I didn't know that was going to be part of my world till I moved here from New York, and it was like, oh, by the way, we've got this place called the Freight House. So I was introduced to that, and everybody has a Freight House story, I think, that they know. So that was a very interesting one for me. So, but one of the coolest things coming from New York, and I did all the big cities. Like I was in San Francisco, I was in New York, I was in Chicago. So these really cool food scenes. But the coolest thing about the Minnesota food scene is just this really cool melting pot. And I've never seen chefs support each other the way they support each other here. I mean, everybody's rooting for each other. Everybody's like posting online, go to my friend's restaurant, go check out this restaurant. And it's been just the coolest thing when you think Minnesota nice or whatever. That's a real thing when you come from a place like New York, or you come from a place like San Francisco, where it's pretty cutthroat, and it's oh, you work for this person, or you work for this person. And it's almost like Anchorman, and you had the news rivalries where we're going to go fight in the parking lot. Everybody's very loyal to their chef, and they're very loyal to this. And so that's been one of the coolest things. It's just this camaraderie, this brotherhood that I found. I always found it in restaurants. That's why I've done it my whole life, is the camaraderie that I had. But it's so cool to have this camaraderie, like even talking with you and other chefs, and Justin and Gavin and all of these people are just, they want to share their gifts. And it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
That's it. I love that you brought that up, because I think it is something that has changed a little bit in Minnesota. Like, I don't think that it was necessarily always this way. I think this is definitely the newer guard of people, right? And I'm relatively young, but I've been doing this for a while, right? Yep. And so I grew up with chefs who is like, no, I'm your chef, and like I've followed that into the new generation where I'm like, I'll leave a place and I'm gonna be this guy's sous chef, and then if that guy gets fired, right, or if that guy quits, I'm out of a job, right? And it's something that I've grown out of a little bit. Sure. But I think that the industry has grown out of it. That intercommunication is something that I definitely have started to see more and more and more of, and it's really a beautiful thing. It's nice. It gives me a little bit of pride to know that it's kind of a Minnesota-specific thing. It
really is, and I even think with the pandemic, it's intensified it. I think all of us, the hospitality industry, the service industry is to be of service to others. So it's just been so cool to see all of these different chefs. And again, what's so great about it is the diversity of it, from different races to different faiths to everything. It's just been so cool to see it. And every one of us has a different calling for why we want to do it and how we want to do it. But it all boils down to be of service. And it's just so cool to see it when we first started doing our give back stuff at Hope. If we would have ever known what it was going to grow into, I probably would have never done it because it would have been so scary. But day one, when we said, hey, we're going to do this, every restaurant around us is like, can I bring you the food from my freezer? Can I bring you the food from my cooler? And that just seemed like the start of something that was really, really cool. It's weird to say in a pandemic that something could be cool, but it really is. How the community kind of came together was really inspiring. Yeah.
I'm with you. It is weird to say that it's cool in a pandemic, but there's lots of positives that have come out of the pandemic. I talk about them kind of often on the show. For one, I think it's important to continue to bring up the positives, right, in a really tough time for a lot of people. Yeah. However, man, it's like what you have done is something that it's cool how you say how it's called Give Hope, because that is very much what you do. Just even with you doing it and then putting a social media post, about something that's regarding that. Yeah. Me seeing that I'm like, wow, man, I feel the hope. You're actually giving me hope, and I'm not even related to the whole way that it's operating. Can you break down some of the details about like how that operation works? Because sure. I talked to Aaron, and Aaron's a little bit of a Goomba. So
it really all stems from my wife. So when we were in Vegas, she worked for this group called the Cupcake Girls, and it was to help people in sex trafficking. So Vegas, there's lots of brothels and strip clubs, and some people want to do that, and it's great. They want to, that's how they make their money, and they enjoy doing it. And there's a whole nother side of it where husbands and boyfriends force people to do those type of things. So Sarah worked with that, with sex trafficking and all of that stuff. So when we came back here to Minnesota, it's home for her. She always was, hey, do we start a version of the Cupcake Girls here because of all the sex trafficking with Mall of America and all of that stuff. And it just never seemed to be the right thing. So restaurants is all I know. And when we decided to get out of the corporate world and kind of do restaurants on our own terms, it was like, well, this is all we know how to do. So could our nonprofit be feeding our community in crisis? And could our nonprofit be, how do we help hospitality workers with all of the things that hospitality workers kind of battle with? So it was, let's just kind of naturally kind of bring that. And it was always our dream to do it. And then our nonprofit, it didn't get started until really the pandemic hit. One day I woke up that morning, I prayed, and I was like, how are we going to help feed these people? And this was before the governor shut restaurants down. And I did a post on Facebook. And I think by that Monday, we had 10,000 requests for meals. So I had to call our staff and call an all-staff meeting, and I said, hey, I put this on social media, and it's been overwhelming. We can't run our restaurant and serve all these people, so we're going to close our restaurant. And that was a really difficult conversation to have. At that time, we only had one restaurant. Yeah. And, oh, by the way, I'm going to shut it down. We had thought that, hey, the governor's going to be shutting down, and he did a few days later, but we started it, and it just kind of... it took off. I mean, it was just crazy. And Sarah and I, we kept watching our bank account literally drop. Because right in the beginning, there was nobody kind of helping us. It was just, we're going to go until we run out of money. And we said, we need to be able to pay our rent for 2 months, and we need to pay 2 car payments. And our bank account got down to 10 grand. And I was like, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And CBS News came and did this big national thing. And people started donating and started helping us along the way. And then it was like this big kind of machine that just kind of kept growing and growing. And it's really weird. I have other restaurants that call me and they're like, we're not big like you, and you had all this infrastructure. I was like, we had me and my wife and like 19 employees there, and literally no money. We lived in an apartment on West 7th. We don't live in one of the mansions up on the hill. We live in an apartment on West 7th. And it just kind of kept growing. And don't get me wrong, like we have a healthy life. I drive a car that I want to drive. So it's not a poor doom and gloom, but it was just, we didn't come from a lot. We left our corporate world. We lost literally everything when I left that corporate world, and it was just it was a crazy kind of time. And it was so crazy how the community rallied, our staff, when we said, I don't think we can pay you. They still showed up, and then donations and stuff started coming in, so we were able to keep writing checks for $500 per person per week. And then we found out some of the folks that were out there didn't qualify for unemployment and didn't qualify for other things because of whatever their reasons were. For maybe they came to this country and did things. So for those folks, we were writing them a check for $1,000 so they could pay their rent. They weren't getting any government assistance. And it just was so crazy how it just kind of organically grew. And then one day it was 100,000 meals later and a couple million pounds of food. And you're just like, how did that happen? So yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, man, this whole thing has been a whirlwind. It's great. It's great to hear that story, because I've kind of been just, peeking over from the fence and like, yeah, that's it's pretty cool shit you're doing over there, guy. But yeah, no, it's good to hear the story. Let's take a quick break, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about this move out of the corporate world, because it's something that I'm very, very curious about.
Sure.
Thank you. Good. All right, so before the break, we were talking about, we talked about hope, and you kind of brought up how you had moved from the corporate world to whatever you would call this organic, more down to earth restaurateur culture. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit like what you used to do, and then and I'm really interested about the transition, because I'm in my own transitionary period right now, and I just there's something about that metamorphosis that goes on, and it's something that's very spiritual for me. So let's get into it.
Yeah, so I grew up a line cook, man. That's what I did. I was a line cook my whole life. I mean, into my 30s, you know what I mean? Yeah. I was a line cook. That's what I did. And I would learn my craft, and I would go to other restaurants, and I would that was what I did. Then I went to work for Brinker International. I guess I was in my late 20s, and did Brinker and opened up hundreds of macaroni grills kind of all over the country. And then I went to work for MGM Resorts in Las Vegas and sat on their board for strategic restaurant development and did the corporate gig there. And then went to New York and worked for the Rooney family that owns the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were the money behind some of Alain Ducasse's restaurants in New York. So I did that for a while. And then I came to Minnesota. A guy named Bob Sabis funded the New Bohemia projects, and then Truck Park. And then I had an offer from another group that had been trying to get me to come on board with them for several years. And I finally accepted the money. I say that, and I can't go into too much of it because there was a little litigation, because once you hit a certain level, they want you to sign all the non-competes and all of that stuff. So it got a little tricky. So I say it's when I sold my soul and did the corporate thing, and I got paraded around to raise money for a group. I mean, every big bank in New York, and I was the one that was the face, and got paraded around and did that for, gosh, it wasn't very long. It was maybe a year or so. And I mean, the big salary, not $100,000, not $200,000. I mean, a big salary.
Yeah.
And
daddy money.
Yeah, and it was more money than I'd ever made in my life. And every day I went home empty, and every day I thought, this is horrible. And one day we found hope. We found this old fire station, and it was just like, we have to do this. And then originally it was going to start out that it was just going to be my wife was going to be running it, because I couldn't leave my corporate world. And then that corporate world said no. And that's when we had to part ways. And hope became kind of literally our hope for our future. So we went from making all of this kind of money to not having a check, not having insurance, not having anything. And it was some scary times. Yeah, I mean, we had put all of our money into hope, but restaurants cost a lot of money to get up and running and all of that. And we put the chips all in. I mean, we got down to nothing, and we went all in with hope. And by the grace of God, it was so weird how hope just kind of just resonated with people, and it was a really cool time. It's the one restaurant I've probably had more success in my entire life. Like New Bohemia, we won hottest concept in the country. We won lots of awards, but it's different. Like hope just is different. Like when people come in, they feel different. They talk about it differently. Our staff literally loves it, and they're so protective of it. And I've never had that in my life. It was always this corporate cog, and people were commodities. Line cooks were commodities. I was a commodity.
Absolutely. Yeah. That sparked something inside me, because I've had a couple people on the show who are, I talk a little bit about the changing of the guard, and they're like they're younger, right? Yep. And they have this like vibrancy and this passion, and they're like an open kitchen, and it's like when I started, you were the help. Yeah. And I didn't want to see you, right? And your whites better be white, and your everything better be exactly how you've been told to do it. There was no, and I don't even mean get out of the way, get your ego out of the way. It was like, no, I don't care if it's shitty, right? I don't care if it's not the best way to do it, right? I don't care if it's non-traditional. This is what. It's come down from on high. It's funny that you say the people on the hill, because it's like in St. Paul, it's a very real metaphor. Oh, right? Yeah. It's like definitely like the people on the hill would like come down, or you would be working on Grand at the Lexington, and the people on the hill would be like, I don't like that girl's hairstyle who's working on the line, and she would be told to change her hairstyle. And it's definitely been a very beautiful paradigm shift. And when you say that, you talk about the way that hope is, and it's a smaller restaurant. It doesn't always need to be small restaurant, but there is a difference of passion. It's about the food. Right? There you can smell it in the air when you go into a restaurant, and it's not about the money. Right? Money's important, don't get me wrong. I'm not being naive.
Sure.
Okay, so this isn't a statement of naivete. This is a statement of it's palpable in the air when you go into a restaurant, and the people love what they're doing, and they know that the food that they're making is bringing people together, or making these two, young kids have a great date, or, bringing a culture, a food culture to light, right? Like it was nice to have Ewan on, but I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, Hmong cuisine, because when I was growing up, I grew up on the East Side. I'm an East Side boy, right? Yeah. The Hmong culture out here was very exclusive. Yeah. Right. Whereas I could speak Spanish with my Mexican friends, and French with the Senegalese, and we could chill out all day and play soccer, right? The Hmongs always had the Hmong team. Yeah. And they always, and it was just very hard to break into their culture. I mean, if you want to go into the history of it, it's they've been through quite a lot of hardship, right? So it's kind of built into the culture. So I think that the fact that Union Hmong Kitchen exists, it's just like it fills me up with joy, and it's beautiful what he's doing, right? It's
amazing.
And so I like what you said about hope. It's just that it's this. although you have this background in this kind of corporate sense, but like even before you were in the big money, it's like when you talk about, you were multiple restaurant concepts in Vegas. That's like pretty high stakes, pretty big money. Very like it's not about making sure that Christos feels the dish is Greek enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you've brought that skill set into these now multiple restaurants where that feeling is palpable.
Yeah.
And I really love it. I really appreciate it.
It was the best, I guess. Again, I have like zero college under my. I'm a line cook. Like literally, it's what I did. It's what I came up on. It's where I learned my craft. And then it was just kind of taking that to start to understand restaurant design and financials. And the great thing about the corporate world is it teaches you that. Then I had to unteach myself, and I still have to do it every single day because you do something for so long that you have to literally untrain your brain that goes, you don't have to wear a white shirt with this apron and this hat. And I have to consciously tell myself crazy things all the time to go, Brian, why do you care what their hat looks like or what this looks like? You have to literally untrain your brain to go, you don't have to, why was that right? And this is wrong. And it's so crazy for me. And I learned so much just from the chefs that I surround myself, the cooks and the servers that I surround myself. And they put me in check all the time. They're like, you're old. What are you talking about with that kind of stuff? So
that's so funny though, because Aaron. Okay, so for everybody at home, I was about to work at the Gnome, and then there was a bunch of crazy, chaotic stuff that happened, so I didn't work. But Aaron told me that I was going to love you, right?
Yeah.
And what you just said is like absolutely me to like 100% agree. Like we'll go to do a food truck service thing, right?
Yeah.
And Aaron shows up in his surly shirt and an old apron, and I come. My apron's ironed. I'm in my whites. I got my hair cut. I have my glasses on. I'm like ready to go. Tech mode. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's so funny because it is something that you have to unteach yourself. I mean, I remember at Public, I'd be yelling at the waiters for having wrinkly pants.
Yeah.
It's like what is it? What do you look like, a ball of laundry?
Yeah. The shoes should look like this. Your pants should look like this. And I think that's part of the reason I started getting so many tattoos too. I always told myself I'm never going back to the corporate world. And I don't know that now they're so mainstream, but when I first started getting them, I'm like, I'm going to do this and do this because I'm going to force myself to succeed and not ever have to go back to it. So it's been a conscious kind of thing on, I'm never going back to this because I never want to see it done that way again. And when you come up in this business, like you're like, you have so many things that are just ingrained in your head and you're just like, man, that's just not right. Even from, you can't have a piercing to, I mean, when I was coming up, there were no female GMs. There wasn't a lot of color within our restaurants, and there wasn't all of this stuff. And it's just like, you have to consciously every single day and just go, these norms that I grew up with and I saw all need broken down. And you have to put yourself in check every once in a while. And anybody that says that's not real is full of shit. It's real. And I mean, I think Jametta, what she's doing with House of Gristle, and even just her name choice on that is just the coolest thing. There's just so much cool stuff going on in the food scene right now. And before, you had to wear it like a badge of honor. I worked for 20 years for this person, and now I finally get to have my own restaurant, where today's kids are going, F you, I'm going to come out and just open my own place, and I'm going to do my own thing. And it's really forced. Your food game better be on point because there's some super talented folks out there right now. So if your game isn't strong, you're out.
Yeah, dude, move aside kind of thing. We have talked about how there is this inter-restaurant support instead of the intra-restaurant support that's going on in the community. However, at the same time, I'll be the first to say that I'm your food better back it up. I'm not, if there's been even with this show, there's been things where I went to taste something and I'm not going to post it because I'm not. It's that's something else that's ingrained in me. Because it's like I learned from people who are kind of from that old school, but also people who are pretty blasphemous. I mean, like what Darren Koch has done and the whole D-Spot thing is like you would have never seen that happen 20 years ago. It's about the quality of the food.
Yeah.
And it's about if people enjoy it. And it's about if I'm sorry, you got a broken sauce on this right now. Like, I'm not having that, dude. I'm not having it. So that's definitely how I feel about that stuff. I like that you brought that up. It's like there are some real talented chefs who are coming up, who are young, and I think a lot of it has to do with social media and the way that media has changed in general, right? Like to advertise for your restaurant and to get it out, word of mouth means something different now. Social media can get you, everybody in the whole city, looking at your restaurant for its soft open in a matter of days. It's something that, I look at your numbers. I'm like, how do I do that? You know? But I think that's something that is also pushing that. There is something that I want to bring up in this segment, and then we'll get on to your shelf.
Sure.
But it's something that's important to me because this is another thing. Like we're talking about the transformation of the restaurant industry, right?
Yep.
And for me, I grew up in a very, very drug-infested drinking world. I mean,
me too.
Yeah,
I think most of us probably. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And still today, it's still you go to certain parts of even St. Paul. There's multiple restaurants where everybody's selling to each other, and it's it's all kind of its own drug culture, right?
Yep.
And I've been sober now for almost 4 years, a couple more months,
Congrats,
and
amazing.
we're talking 4 years, and but that is very much that my chefs. I would have to, pick them up from vans on the side of the road.
Oh, yeah.
And service is starting and I'm nodding off in the bathroom and I'm the sous chef and everybody's like, what the fuck are we going to do? That was it was so normalized, right? Yeah. Now, your restaurant it's night and day to that world, right? You have a zero tolerance policy. You're not allowed to sit at the bar after work. You can't date anybody because that's another problem, right? Once the sexual drive gets kicked into the restaurant group, well, it's like you get coke, booze, and sex in the same place, and it's just everybody's like, it's just a nightmare. Yeah. So I want to talk to you a little bit about like how has that worked for you? I'm sure it's worked well, but I want to know kind of like the details. Like, how do people react? Like, what kind of chefs? Like, and I know that you support people through kind of that transition, although it is a hard transition to make. So let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. So part of our calling in our restaurants is providing a safe work environment for everybody. Doesn't matter what your faith is, how you want to live your life, any of that stuff. So when you come into our restaurant, we want you to feel that you're good. So if you're going through counseling or you're going through whatever it is that you're going through, if drugs and alcohol are running rampant in our restaurant, that's not good. And if sexual harassment, and again, I've been in this industry a long time, and I've seen my chefs doing blow in the walk-in. I mean, I've seen it all. I've seen an old GM having sex with a minor in a restaurant that I had to fire in Vegas. I've seen it all. So for me, it was, how do we do something different? And I would see, well, you can only have one drink after shift, or I would see, if the kitchen kicked ass, we can all do a shot of tequila at the end. And nothing would make me happier because, one, I love tequila and I would love to do a shot at the end. But every time I've seen it, it just progressively just ramps up and it ramps up. And the next thing you know, your bartender's drunker than the people sitting in the bar. And it just became so bad. And I went through a couple robberies in Vegas, literally, where I saw people shot in front of me. And it was always like a line cook or a dishwasher that was battling addiction. Yeah. So for me, I think I was so traumatized by it that I said, we're going to have a zero tolerance policy on this. And that doesn't mean we have, I've seen it where we've had chefs that have battled alcoholism and all of that. And we'll support you and we'll help you, whatever you need to get through that and get on the other side of it. We're all about that. But we're not going to do it inside of the restaurant. So not even I love tequila, and I've got an incredible tequila selection at Woodfired. I don't drink in my restaurants. There's lots of other places you can go do it. And you just say stupid stuff. And again, I learned the hard way. I was at New Bohemia just a few years ago, man. And I went out to a bar one night, and I was saying some really stupid stuff to somebody, and his wife was the GM of one of my restaurants, and I'm telling this guy, F you and F this and da da da. And then I go show up at my restaurant and I'm tuned and I'm saying lots of stupid things. So it's not Brian's holier than thou. It's Brian's messed up so much in his lifetime that I'm trying to learn from it. But that's really how we've kind of positioned our restaurants and said, if we're going to really say we're purposeful and our name's Purpose Driven Restaurants, then you can't just pick and choose what's easy and what's not easy. And you have to, who are you and what do you stand for? That's what I say at every one of our meetings and anything that we do. And me as an individual, I have to check myself on it and go, is it who you are and is it who you stand for? And if it's not, then something has to give. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like what you had to say about, I actually agree with you pretty much on every single point that you brought up, because that's very much the truth, right? Yeah. Like, it's not, you give a chef an inch, they take a mile. It's just the reality is it does progress. Mm-hmm. It turns from, we had a shot of tequila, especially if you're dealing with, chefs tend to, the kind of personality that it takes to be a chef often folds into the same kind of personality that, makes addicts, right?
Yep.
So it's like you give somebody a shot of tequila as a celebration. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, well, now it's a Thursday shot because they're doing good every Thursday, and then then you're pulling bottles out of their backpack.
Yep.
And I've seen it happen a whole bunch of times too. And I really hope that people don't get the idea that it's holier than thou, because it's definitely not the idea that I got. And I think it's great because, as somebody who's gotten sober, like I got sober, and then my first job was back in a restaurant.
Yeah,
I had used it, right?
Sure.
And while it was like really great to have that support, right? Like, you got a job, it's like you're a triple felon. Come back on in, And it's like, but it was very difficult, man. It was super difficult because people don't understand, right? They don't, when you're using or you're an alcoholic, you do not understand this whole other way of things. It's completely different than anything you've ever done. You're like, no, I don't drink when I wake up in the morning, and people kind of, it's hard, it's difficult, right? To stay sober. So I think that to have that place is just like, it's something beautiful and something new, and I'm really happy that you're doing it. And I can see friends of mine who have, who work for you, who have struggled with those kinds of things, really thrive in that environment, because now it's like, now you don't have to worry about like homeboy,
there's no temptation
passing you a bump. You know what I mean? It's like, no, I'm going to work. That compartmentalization on like an immersive level is really beautiful to see. When you say that, I don't drink in my restaurants, that compartmentalization is the same thing that like a healthy drinker would say. Right? But we're chefs and we're fucking pirates. So like we're teeth to nail to whatever the saying is. I want to get drunk. You know what I mean? So I think that it's great that you have that. But at the same time, you're right. It is just the logical thing to do. It's like, no, we're not doing it, right? No, you can't date, because it's like that. Then that line is fuzzy on who is what and what is who, and
it becomes, again, just from lawsuits and sexual harassment. If there's a breakup within the restaurant and now one of you doesn't want to be broken up, lines get super blurred, and people, it's just I came up in this restaurant. I used to sleep with everybody that was in the restaurant. Yeah. Even when I was married, I mean, I again, the holier than thou, and I talk about my faith and stuff. I was a shitbag of a human being. I had 2 small kids. I was married, and none of that stopped me. I was drinking in my restaurants. I was doing anything and everything that I wanted to do, making super bad decisions. So for me, the learning curve has been long, and I was a slow learner. I'm 50 years old now, so I did a lot of stupid things. So for me, part of it is just self-preservation. It's like we need to do these things, just as, again, not all chefs and not all line cooks and not all servers, but we're like this ragtag group of misfits that find a home in restaurants. And I think that's so true in restaurants, that we would have Christmases together. We would have Thanksgivings together because most of us, our families were somewhere else, or we were doing something else. So you find your family within these restaurants, which is a beautiful thing. And then things get really blurry, and the next thing you know, drugs are involved and alcohol are involved, and everybody's sleeping with everybody. So your girlfriend this week might be this server, and your girlfriend next week's this server. And oh, by the way, your appetizers are going to come up faster because you're my girlfriend this week. And and so the whole thing just gets so blurred when all of that's going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah. It's like, woo. Yeah, it's in the rear view. It's in the rear view.
Right.
I'm triggered right now,
right? I'm
sorry. No, you know, I like that you are kind of willing to bring that up as like, no, I know from experience, right? I know that this is not the way to fucking do it from experience. And that's kind of, you know, I'm a big AA guy. Well, I wouldn't say a big AA guy, but I'm in the program, right? And that's kind of how you have to bring everything into, like, people who are new in AA and NA. Yeah. It's like, no, I don't know this because I'm like a drug counselor. I know it because I did it. Like when you said when you're a shitbag, it's like you're not a shitbag, but it's
I had shitbag tendencies.
Tendencies, yeah, dude. That's my first merch drop. Shitbag tendencies. Your face, shitbag tendencies underneath.
I love it because it's just it's super uncomfortable for me too, because I'll get people that'll see us with Give Hope, and they'll see us giving stuff out, and somebody will send me a message and like, you're so inspiring. It's like, I'm not. I promise you. It's it's so weird for me to have this false facade. So I love like stuff like this where I can talk about it. That's not, if you look at me as the whole of one, I have shitbag tendencies, and I have every day I want to do better, and I hope that I can live my life better every day. But if you looked at me as a whole and looked at me over my 50 years, I promise you the shitbag tendencies way outweighed the good tendencies.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. All right. I've really enjoyed this interview up until this point. That I do a little segment called What's on the Shelf. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to see what's on the shelf, and then we're going to call it a day for today. Sound
awesome.
Good?
Sounds great.
Cool. What's on the shelf, man? What's on the shelf, man? All right, welcome back to Minnesota Well Done. We have Brian Ingram. We have your shelf. So I do this segment, and it's kind of grown to be whatever people want to bring in, you know. Sure. At first the idea was like, oh, I'll bring cookbooks, but then, you know, when I had farmers or you know, mushroom cultivars, what are you going to bring in?
Sure.
So, I like to kind of see what people are like and what they like to do and what they're interested in, and sometimes products and stuff. So
sure.
Let's start picking stuff off the shelf and showing it to the camera, and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Should I grab it and bring it down, or do we leave it up?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so French Laundry, Thomas Keller. I think if you're a chef and you haven't studied what this guy's doing and you're serious about your craft, he's just, for me, just even as a restaurant guy, I just love his thing. Like when he would do other restaurants, they would say, is it like French Laundry? Is it this? And it's, he would always say per se, it's like that. So even if you went into any of my restaurants, there's certain things. Is this hope? Well, it's not hope per se, but even if I'm going to do another hope, which I'm gonna, and we'll probably call it grace or faith, everything, we're the sum of our life experiences. So it's not this and it's not that, but it's everything kind of coexists together. And I think you're the sum of all your parts, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's just kind of the way I see it. But this man's changed really the food landscape. There's very few chefs out there that have kind of changed the landscape. And if you look at most top chefs around the country, at some point they had some sort of interaction with this man, or worked for somebody that worked for him. So I just think he's just so on point. I like reading his cookbooks. I love the recipes on him. And again, I trained classically when I was really young. That was a long time ago. So for me, it's just fun to kind of always go back to that and kind of look at the different things that are out there.
Yeah, Thomas Keller is an interesting one because you're right. Like when you said the classic thing, it's like he definitely has that, but he dresses it up in this modern Americana, right? And it's quite beautiful. It's quite breathtaking the way that he does it. The aesthetics of everything that he does. When you said just as a restaurateur, right? There's something to that as well, where the way that he dresses his food and the way that he makes it like catch your eye is very different than what happened previously, right? Like I have behind me Charlie Trotter, right? And
huge fan of his as well.
Charlie Trotter is like he's my. We were talking about all the bad stuff that was going on in the industry. I mean, that's kind of the dude, but that's beside the point. What I mean is that you can see, like, if we were to open this book up and then go through it, and then open this book up and then go through it, there's a clear difference in the aesthetics and the way that the pictures are taken, in the in the kind of ingredients and colors and techniques that are used. This is much more like West Coast fresh. This is you're gonna go into this bustling snowy city and it's just.
I lived in Chicago a long time. Chicago's what I would probably even consider home, even over Alaska. So and I remember waiting a year to get in his restaurants, and it just was. Yeah, Trotter is as good as they get. And for me, Thomas is just, I learned so much from him. And I'm such a freak now in our restaurants, from our plateware to our glassware to everything. Everything has to coexist or you confuse the shit out of the guests. When they come in, they're like, I don't know what it was. Something was just off. And if everything doesn't kind of coexist together, it just feels weird. You don't really know why it feels weird. You just go in the restaurant and you're like, it was okay. Yeah, the food was great. Service was great. But I don't know what it was. And I think he just was so refined on how he did it and how he presents the food. And a lot of times it's food that it's just presented in a way that you'd never thought of. And it's just so beautiful. And I do call it California cuisine. It's that very fresh kind of take on stuff.
Yeah, I like what you said about the refinement. And the reason that I brought this up, and I just think it's such a black and white comparison, because the refinement that happens with Trotter is like this. You read his steps and it's like, and then we peeled the tomatoes, and then we covered the tomatoes in brown sugar, and then we put the tomatoes in the oven, and then 7 days later we did 355 more steps, and now you have this amazingly delicious dish and beautiful. But where Thomas Keller is like, here's the fish that I made.
Yes.
And that simplicity, I'm not saying that that's all it is, but just for a visual, like the simplicity of that, I think resonates with people in the modern day, where we're not. This isn't the 80s anymore, right? Like we're all, my dad just had a friggin' heart attack. You know what I mean? It's like we're all dying slow, man. And but the health and the taste kind of go in tandem here, and then you bring that refinement, you bring that elevation, and that's something that Thomas Keller does.
100%.
Yeah, let's bring up another one.
I'll bring up another one. It's my cookbook for my life, so it's my Bible. So for me, again, being a degenerate as a kid, and it's my one way I find balance. And in all of our restaurants, we have these hope and prayer cards, and we always tell everybody, I don't care what you believe. My job isn't here to judge you if you're this religion or that religion. Our job as a human being is to love somebody. And I don't ever remember reading in my Bible that I'm supposed to judge anybody. And I think that's where Christians in general get it really, really wrong, when they stand up on that hilltop and you did this and you did this.
Yeah.
That's not in anything that I read. So, and again, I cuss a lot in my restaurants. I do. So I've got a big Jesus tattoo on my hand. So I'm sure people look at me and they're like, who is this guy? And again,
beating the shit out of somebody.
I'm not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but once a week I go ground myself at church, and and it's just, so for me, that's just kind of my grounding point. And in this industry, whatever your grounding point is, if it's you're doing yoga or Buddha, if you don't have a grounding point, I would do all the other things that would ground me.
Yeah.
I mean, in a restaurant,
you don't have a grounding point, you're going to float away, my guy.
Yeah, it's just so weird in the restaurant because you have the highest of highs. I mean, I say it's like a professional athlete. Like, you train your whole life. If you're a line cook, you're training to be a chef. You're training. You come in, ticket times are you got 100 tickets on your board, and you got to clear that board. It's like finishing a race. That's why everybody's high-fiving. You get done at the end of the shift, and you're having cocktails, and you're like, holy shit, we made it through that. And it's also that high because you're like, yeah, we just cleared the board and people are loving the food and all of that. So it's the highest of highs. So if you don't know how to come back from that and you're balancing it with all the extracurriculars, it's a tough road for you. So that's my balance, kind of.
I love that.
Campfire cookbook.
Okay.
Probably the hokiest cookbook you'll ever find. And that's what I love about cooking. I do a lot of hokey stuff. I do German chocolate pancakes. I do carrot cake pancakes. I like having fun with food. So Campfire Cookbook, we have a restaurant that has lots of campfires, so to speak, inside of it at Wood-Fired. So I just like reading it. I created a concept called Weber Grill in Chicago. And everything's cooked on authentic Weber kettles, but I never cooked food in the charcoal. I just cooked on top of it. So that's a new thing for me is how do I cook food now that we have these giant hearths? How do I actually use the charcoal? And that's not just a heat source anymore. It's a flavor. It's flavor. And how do I put different things directly into the charcoal? So I have fun with this one. It's just kind of fun and hokey, and my kids can look in here and go, "Oh, Dad, let's make that." That's just fun. So everything doesn't have to be Charlie Trotter and all of those. Yeah. I mean, I worked with Alain Ducasse, the most decorated chef in the world, 21 Michelin stars. So I've got that, but I also have the Campfire Cookbook. So.
Well, there's something to say about this. So, like, we're in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
This is this is pretty high north.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like when you get up to places like Two Harbors and the Canadian border, you have the Boundary Waters. You have people who really believe that this is the way to go. Right?
Yeah.
Like so I worked at Victory 44 for a while, and I'm really close with Chad Grant of Victory 44.
Yep.
And one big thing that he wanted to do for a real long time was to kind of do these guided hunts, right?
Yeah.
And then we would, field dress the deer, and then we butcher the deer, and then we cook the deer, and it'd be this whole, extravagant thing. And I really loved the idea of it, right? And it hasn't worked out for multiple reasons, but
sure.
To cook out where you do not have a kitchen is an entirely different experience, right? Like just cleaning a fish, right?
Yeah.
Like just cleaning a fish. You clean a fish on a rock instead of a table.
Yeah.
It's a completely different experience. And you cook on something and you have a cast iron, maybe 3 cast irons, and you have to figure out how to make everything work with your palate and your knowledge and all these different refinement techniques that you have. It's like it is a little bit, you can say that it's hokey, but at the same time it's like, you ever get out like you ever do 3 portages, 180 rod portages out into the middle of the Boundary Waters, and you realize you don't have your fucking cast iron? It's not hokey, it's what you need to do. And I love that.
And I grew up in Alaska, and my folks had
that's right, that's crazy.
Charter boats and fishing boats, and we had a airplane where you'd fly in on the river and go camping. And just like you said, I mean, I grew up cleaning fish, standing on the pontoon of my dad's float plane. And it's just, so for me, it's also comfort to me, like when I look at that kind of stuff and do it. And so for me, having fun with food, and for me, food's about emotion and how we connect with this world. So so if I can do anything and get emotions out of people when they eat my food, that's really, my job's done after that.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
I love that. So you got
one more, I think. What do we got? Anthony Bourdain. So actually 2 more things. So I mean, all of us, I think, as chefs, I mean, it's probably even cliche that I bring this, but this guy, I knew him. I've been fortunate to do stuff with the Food Network and Travel Channel and all of those. And he's one of the only he's one of the only celebrity chefs that still came across like a line cook. And that's what I loved about him. I think he was an incredible human being. I think he was an incredible ambassador to food. And I think he had everything that was right about food. He got it right, man. Even from his show, when he would go around and how he talked about food, his love of food. I mean, he was the first one. I think that's why he was all of our hero. Was he was a line cook, man, and he acted like a line cook still, and he had no bullshit for Yelp reviewers and all of that stuff. Food is just so personal. Like, even for me as a restaurant, people are like, why do you take it so personal? It's like, because I built the tables in the restaurant. I poured the concrete going into that restaurant. I picked the plates. Your blood, sweat, and tears go into these. So when you get dismissed sometimes, and granted, sometimes it's warranted. We're not on our best all the time, but it's one thing to tell somebody, hey, your food wasn't great tonight. But when you go after them and just your whole life you suck because you did this, it's just so heartbreaking. And so I think he was the best. And when he passed, I was a shell for a week. I cried. All of the stuff that you would think you wouldn't probably do, that one hit me really, really hard because he was one of us, and I think we all identified with him. So that's why I brought that one.
Yeah, I think I don't think it'll ever be a cliche for me, right?
Yeah.
This is like Anthony Bourdain is always welcome in some respect on the show. I'm thinking about kind of changing up the shelf behind me, and it's like I don't look at it as a cliche because he was the antithesis of cliche in life, right?
Yeah.
And what you said, he was a line cook.
Yep.
And just a little bit on me, it's like what a line cook went through in life, right? Like the same addictions, the same problems with mental health and stuff. And I think that his death, for a lot of people for people who didn't know him, right, and people who only saw him on TV, and especially us line cooks who were like rooting for him, we thought that somebody had finally made it. You know what I mean? Like they made it, and it's like, okay, if we talked about this badge of honor, right? Like if I'm doing this every day, for 9 hours a day, and I got to sell a little bit of glass on the side, and it's like, so what if the if the GD's playing kick door with me? It's like I will make it, and I will be happy, right?
Yeah.
When he died, I think that it was a very clear sign of the instability and the lack of sustainability in the lifestyle of the chef. And I think that since his death, you've seen, all the things that we've talked about in the show that have been these positive movements. Like I talked with Kate a little bit about this. She's got Project Black and Blue going on, so we had kind of a deep conversation about where the industry is going in terms of the culture. I think this was one of those things that really galvanized a lot of people and started to get people going towards, like, I want to be happy. I want to be. I want a job that pays my health insurance.
Yeah.
Right. Or even less than that, pays my rent.
Yeah.
Because I've been in jobs where I haven't gotten paid, or I was supposed to be getting paid in a certain way, or and then I've been in jobs where I'm getting paid minimum. And I need to make more money than minimum. How am I going to do that if I'm, working 90 hours a week? So I think that I love him for a variety of reasons, right? There's been certain things that I've seen on the shows that I'm just like, man, this dude is a freaking gangster. I do a segment on this show called Yelp Review Clapback, where I just hate on people who are doing Yelp reviews, So you're right. He is definitely a line cook, or was a line cook, I should say. Rest in peace, man. And he's always welcome on the show. Never a cliche. Never a cliche.
And then our big acts. So our acts. When we opened Wood-Fired, things got a little weird at the end of it because we had the name change and all of that. Not the end of it, but right before we were opening it. And I made some decisions because of that I wasn't thrilled with. It wasn't the restaurant that I had envisioned in my brain when we opened it. It was the plateware was a little too formal for what I had wanted. I always wanted it to just be these super approachable meats just done in a really, really great way.
Yeah.
I wanted authentic tortillas. I wanted all of this. So when we opened it, yes, we were slow roasting meats. Yeah, we were doing all those things. And I was really happy with the food. I was happy with our chef Patrick, what he was doing. So all the decisions that were made were mine, and it was, we have to have food out in X amount of time. We've got to do this. And I wasn't happy with that at all. So what these kind of represent are when we reopen Wood Fired, we're going to go back to what I originally wanted it to be. And what I really wanted it to be was just these, we have the largest wood burning hearths in the country.
Yeah.
Then damn it, we better be using them all the time, and every guest needs to come up and see it.
Yeah.
Not, hey, I sat on the patio and I had no idea that it was there, or I sat upstairs. So when we reopen it, I want it to be like these barbecue joints that I grew up kind of going to, and I spent a lot of time in Texas when I was doing stuff with Brinker, and just seeing these amazing barbecue joints that you walked up and you got these great meats, and they literally gave you a thing of Wonder Bread, and you went back to your table and you ate these amazing meats on bread. So I want to take that same kind of thing, but just do it with these great kind of Tex-Mex or whatever you want to call it, Southern California fresh meats, whatever you want to call that. That's what I want. So I want whole roasted pigs. I want chicken, and we're going to do these great salsas and great meats and roast everything, octopus, fish, all of that. You come up, you're going to order it by the half pound, the pound, however you want it. And then we're going to hand make tortillas, and you're going to go to your table. And you're going to eat these amazing meats and charred vegetables and charred salsas, and just a more get your hands dirty kind of a way. And I think, so I've got these giant cutting boards that kind of look like this, and we're going to use these axes, and we're going to just get after meats. And I want people to come up. I want them to smell it. I want them to feel it. I want them that when these hit, I want them to know what they're getting and know that these aren't just for show. I always wanted that to have its own YouTube channel where you could dial in at any time and see these giant fires with meats cooking on them. And somehow I went away from that, and we're not going to do that when we reopen it. We're going to embrace all things fire, and we're going to cook the shit out of some meats, and we're going to make some great salsas and roasted vegetables and fish and seafood, and we're going to give you handmade tortillas, and you're going to go sit at your table and drink margaritas and beer and do it in a whole lot less formal way, a lot of butcher paper and that kind of stuff. So that's what those are all about.
That sounds amazing. This is me filling out my application to work there. That sounds absolutely fantastic. I went through my whole phase of everything has to be refined, and we're gonna put, I don't know. When I worked for Harsey, it was like I was in a certain part, right?
Yeah.
And then, when I worked for Rebel, it was like I was in a certain zone, right? This absolute, it needs to look this way every time kind of thing. And I've gone away from that. I just have seen people do it in a different way that almost all the time, if the technique is refined and the presentation isn't as refined, that's usually where the gold is, man. That's where the beauty is, and I'm really excited for that whole restaurant. I've heard, kind of, again, whispers on the wind, about what you are planning to do with it. For you the way that you explained it to me made me salivate, made me want to work there. I'm excited to see it. Since In Bloom cut the cord, I was like, when you talk about the biggest hearth in the country, I'm like, how, dude? How did it? How did it go? Of course, there's all these problems, but it's a place that I really it's a space I enjoy. It's a concept I enjoy, and the concept that you have turned it into, as you just explained, makes me really excited, man. It makes me really, really excited. I have one question for you before we head out, and it's a little bit. It'll seem slightly random, but it's just kind of it's been on my mind since I met you, honestly. And for people at home, I'm good friends with Aaron, so I'm always talking with Aaron, and I'm kind of I've been next to the Gnome and its
Sure.
growth process, right? I want to hear from you just kind of like where I'm trying to formulate the question, and I hope this doesn't come off as offensive because it's super not.
No.
So like what you said about a wood fired and how it's changed, right? The same thing kind of has happened with the Gnome where like we can't do that right now.
Yeah.
It's about 15-minute ticket times.
Yeah.
It's about this is the way that we're going to survive. This is the way that we're going to do it. How do you balance that? Because for me, that's probably my biggest problem in the restaurants is there's this burning passion for me to do things a certain way, right? Like not even the white coats and all that, but like there's certain ways that I know like that are the right way to do something and the good way to do something, the healthy way to do something, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, especially when we came up in the restaurants, you weren't able to do that. So how do you balance that in your mind?
Yeah. I don't know if I can ever balance it because again, the right way to like prepare meats and to do things and then there's the reality of we've got to pay the mortgage and we've got to pay the rent and we've got to do X amount of covers to be able to do that. So the Gnome even evolved from what I originally wanted to do at the Gnome. That place was as bad as you've ever seen any restaurant on any of your worst nightmares, from every piece of plumbing in the wall I didn't know about. So going into
my doctorate dissertation on the stuff you found there.
Oh my gosh, man. I'm pretty sure that's where COVID started. I mean, it was really, really bad. So the money we had to spend to get it open doubled from what we thought it was going to be. So economics started coming into play, and we've got a lot of seats there. And how do we, during COVID and during all of this stuff, how do we make this business viable? So Chef Aaron's super talented. Gavin's super talented. And I remember when we first opened it, everybody's got their little tongs and their pinchers. And I walked in, I was like, oh, Jesus. I'm going to file bankruptcy now. So we had to adapt. And so like we've got a bone marrow pot pie. We have some great beer can chicken and all of those things. So for me, the technique is on the front side when you're roasting meats and you're doing that. So that's where you've got to take your time and you've got to do things the right way. And then when it comes to service, if we have all that stuff ready to roll, the meat's roasted all night while we weren't there. And now they're ready to go. And we get it all the time. Like, how did that come out so fast? Well, we spend a lot of time on the front end doing things. So on the back end during service, we can maximize covers. And even with COVID, when they're saying you have an hour and a half, and it's one of the things we were getting beat up online, like they make me get in and out within an hour and a half. And so, well, it wasn't us. It was the governor. I would like to sit on the patio at the Gnome all day as well. Yeah. But we weren't allowed to do that. So we had to adapt to that and say, if we got to get people in and out, and a lot of times people want to look at the menu for a long time. They want to hang out. They want to pregame when you've got 65 beers and 10 draft cocktails. They want to pregame. So then now you've only got 30 minutes to eat. So if our kitchen... You
got Brian out there like, hey!
Yeah. If your food takes 45 minutes to get out, you're dead in the water. So that for me, that's still the toughest thing is how do you balance a business as well as how you want to do food. And if nothing would make me happier someday to do a Gavin and be a Demi and I could take time and people are going to hang out for 3 hours and I could have 20 seats. That's the dream someday. That's the dream. I've never figured out how I can make the economics work on it. So, but that's the dream. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that's a great answer. With that, I think we're going to cut it off for today. Hopefully I can have you back on soon, especially when you're opening Woodfire. Just remember, I think you have my resume.
I think we've got you, You're going to just have to decide if you've got enough time to come hang with us and throw axes.
That's the reality. I mean, depending on when you open it, though,
April. No later than April.
Oh, yeah. Reopen. I mean, I'm done in May.
All right.
So let's roll.
All
right. I love it. Thank you so much. Have a good night, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. That was awesome.
Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
No, that was
heart. Lovers remember my old arms are burning. My memory. I shiver writes a new song. I can almost hear them singing along as I keep digging away. Her love rubbed me wrong, methamphetamine, alcohol, if only left me stay. Buried in the backyard, long after gone to my childhood dark bodies. Our faces remain. Some of them were my friends. Some were more like enemies. Shouldn't matter now to them. Should've said something much to me. Last night I took apart most everything in your garage and got myself some dollars and cents. Taken off to St. Paul, where I will surely spend it all on Hope Street, the last house on the block. My phone's ringing, but I muted. She probably wants to know what the hell I'm doing. But man, I don't really fucking know. Just sitting here high as hell with some nothing sickest man I think I have ever met. Some